It's really a pleasure to be here, and it brings back a lot of memories being back on campus here. My first time up on this part of campus was in 1981, just to date myself. In 1981, I drove up the driveway to Bursley Hall and unpacked my boxes and lived in Bursley from 1981 to 1983. And none of this stuff was up here. So my first memories of this space that we're currently here in was playing Frisbee golf and things like that, because this was the advantage of being on North Campus. You had all this big open space up here. So just to really date myself, so 1986 was the year that I graduated. It was EECS at that point, electrical engineering and computer science. And I was, I think, the first year that we had, or roughly in the first set of years that we had actually a computer engineering major in the College of Engineering. So, just had a wonderful time here, and it was a great way to start my career, and I'll come back to that a little bit as I talk here. But what I'm going to spend most of my time talking about, and just to set your expectations, I'll talk for about 25 or 30 minutes. And then we'll spend the rest of the time taking questions from you all. So think about questions and what might be on your mind of everything that I'm talking about here, or other things you want to ask questions about. But the main thing is that I want to talk about is this concept of human plus machine, and this book that I wrote called Human Plus Machine. You see a copy of the cover there, Reimagining Work in the Age of AI. And it's a book that I started writing 2.5 or 3 years ago, because my co-author is a guy named Jim Wilson, and he leads our AI research in Accenture. And we were both disturbed by a couple of things with artificial intelligence. One was we were disturbed that in the business community generally, where we work, that there was a lack of understanding of what AI really was, and a lot of misunderstanding of AI itself. So we wanted to provide a simple to understand guide for the average business person to understand artificial intelligence. And we also wanted to correct some misperceptions that we believed were cropping up in the business dialogue around AI. So, and I'll talk about those as we go through the talk. So that's why we wrote the book. We spent about a year or so writing it, and then we had to rewrite it because things were changing so fast. So we rewrote a lot of the book, and then finally published it in March of this year. And I'll share a summary of the ideas that we're talking about in the book. And this really reflects our Accenture perspective on artificial intelligence and what we see happening out in the world. But what I always tell people is, so you guys got a lot on your mind. You just came out of classes. You're having a nice dinner here. So if you lose track of what I'm talking about, the summary of what I'm going to say is the plus sign on the chart. So if you remember nothing else from what I talk about today, just remember the plus sign, because the primary message that is supported by our research and all the work we're currently doing around AI is that we really believe that the key, particularly from a business perspective, when we look at the way that this plays out, is that the key to unlocking value is looking at a human plus machine approach. It's the combination of people and AI, algorithms, technology, robotics. It's how that comes together that's really the equation that we need to be looking at. And when we started writing the book, a lot of the dialogue was versus machine, human versus machine. And the plus is the biggest thing that I'd like you to take away, and I'll explain why that's true and give you a lot of examples as we go. And the other key point is in the subtitle there that I'd ask you to take away is this idea of reimagining work. Because we believe that we're at a point in technology. It's not just AI, but it's other things that are happening in technology that require us to rethink the way that businesses work, rethink the way that organizations work. And we call this reimagining. We believe this is a new way, a new leadership mindset, and a new way that, that companies need to think about the way that they apply technology. So think about the plus sign and this idea of reimagining. Just to take you back, there you go. I just wanted to prove that I really am from Michigan. So that's me at, I forget what football game it was last year. And you can see my family has a number of Michigan fans in it too. I've got my wife and 4 kids. Not all of them went to Michigan, but we've got a loyal Michigan family, as you can see. And I was saying earlier that talking to Ben about this, my first kind of aha moment around AI came here at Michigan, one of the benefits of going to a school like Michigan is just the things you're exposed to that you don't expect to be exposed to. And in my junior year here at Michigan, there was a guest professor in from the University of Indiana named Douglas Hofstadter, a cognitive scientist who wrote a book called Golden Lesher-Bach, The Eternal Golden Braid. And he was, at the time, exploring the connection between cognitive psychology and technology. And it's a fascinating book if you haven't read it. And it really was a life-changing book for me because it took me from what I was studying at the time, which was language theory and compilers and things like that, into thinking about the cognitive science and AI, and got me on this thread that's still continuing with the human plus machine work. If you fast forward then from Michigan, I graduated in 1986, and I'm still at the company that I joined after Accenture. So I've been at Accenture for 32 years since I graduated from University of Michigan. That wasn't my plan by any stretch. I thought I'd stay a year and then go back and get my PhD and go back doing all the fun stuff that I'd been studying here. And I ended up staying at Accenture because I realized that I joined Accenture at this time when the PC had just came out. The IBM PC was released right about the time I came to the workforce. The first PC that I was exposed to on campus here was the Apple Lisa, which again was another mind-blowing thing to see, a graphical user interface on the desktop computer at the time. And being in a position at Accenture to ride that technology wave of applying technology from the desktop computer, local area network, client-server computing, enterprise computing, cloud computing, internet, e-commerce, mobile computing, Internet of Things. And that whole evolution of technology that's happened has been a fascinating experience, and it's kept me really excited about the roles I've had at Accenture and the work that I've been able to do. So as Ben said, I'm the Chief Technology and Innovation Officer for Accenture. If you don't know what Accenture is, we're a company of, it says up there 459,000 employees, but growing continuously. We're about 490,000 employees right now, approaching 500,000 employees around the world. We're the largest technology services company in the world, so we help companies apply technology to their business, and we're the biggest firm in the world at doing that kind of work. So we partner with Apple and Amazon and SAP and Oracle and Microsoft and many, many other companies and many startups to apply their technology to help companies improve the way their businesses work. So that's the core of what we do. And again, being at Accenture as this revolution has happened has been a really fascinating spot to be, to observe all these changes in technology and how it's transformed organizations the way that people work, which takes us to kind of what's happening today. And you all are studying technology, and you're in a great place in the evolution of technology to see a lot of these things happening. So a lot of these things may be familiar to you already, but we're living in an amazing time if you think about the technology that's available to us to solve problems. And these are just some examples. I could have chosen a lot of different examples, but just think of some of the things that are happening now. This is a robot called Sophia. I'm sure, Ben, you're familiar with Sophia. I'm sure a number of people in the room are. How many of you are familiar with Sophia? I've seen videos. So a lot of you have seen Sophia. And I think what's interesting about her is not necessarily her intelligence per se, but some of the ways that Sophia is interacting and creating connection with people, and some of the emotional response that David Hanson, the creator of Sophia, has been working on. And so Sophia is, I think, an interesting example of pushing the humanoid element of technology in an interesting way. Think about some of the other technologies and the way businesses are applying them. This is Walmart. We just had Black Friday, right, and Cyber Monday. This was some preparation that Walmart did for Black Friday, because Black Friday is one day, and you have to get your stores ready that one day, because it's the one day where you make money as a retailer. That's why it's called Black Friday. You go from red to black and profit on that one day. So you got to make sure you operate your store right. How do you make sure you do it right? So we've used technology, in this case, virtual reality and mixed reality, so that store associates and store managers could anticipate the craziness of Black Friday, the out-of-stock situations, the panic shopping situations, everything that could happen before it happened, practice how they should handle it, and make sure they're ready for the real thing when it happens. So, virtual reality technology in that case. High precision, medical robotic surgery, cutting the skin off a grape in that case. Other things like vertical farming, amazing technology. How many of you have seen or visited a vertical farm or seen what's happening here. This is an example from a company called Aero Farm in downtown Newark, New Jersey. They happen to live close to where I live. And it's formed by a guy named David Rosenberg. And they're using AI in a very interesting fashion. They're monitoring 30,000 data points on every seed that's planted so they can understand the growing characteristics and the impacts of the nutrition and light and everything else that's happening. So in a warehouse with no natural sunlight, no soil, 95% less water than traditional growing techniques, they're raising from seed to edible, harvestable produce in 18 days. And if you study agriculture, 18 days harvestable produce is remarkable and amazing and about 4 times faster than you can do in any natural environment in the world. And a lot of that is due to the way that they're using technology. And they can actually adjust, if you like your spinach more bitter and less chewy, they can actually use natural variables based on the learning that they've had to adjust and grow produce individually for you. And that's an example of interesting stuff happening there. Quantum computing, we're actually using quantum computing in interesting ways today, which really surprises me. About 8 years ago, one of the things that I got wrong in my role as CTO is I de-emphasized and lowered the priority of quantum computing because I thought it was going to be a lot longer in its gestation period. And then some things started happening. We put it back on the agenda, and Dan Garrison, who's one of my Accenture colleagues, is leading some of our work in this area. We put it back on the agenda, and here in Michigan, we're actually doing some interesting work with quantum computing, and we're actually doing real projects for clients using some early forms of client computing from companies like D-Wave that you see in the center of the picture here. So quantum computing starting to, in its early stages, be very interesting. And then things like CRISPR, in the top center, which is technology to edit the human genome, clip out errant sequences. So the reason I go through all that is we live in these amazing times, and there's a lot of technologies that businesses need to worry about and that we work with business executives to try to digest. But if we look at, as we look at it, AI is what we're seeing as the most important trend that businesses face right now across that whole spectrum. And in fact, AI is the trend that's shaping a lot of those other trends and accelerating a lot of those other trends. So things like the virtual reality that I showed you there is really the things we're doing we're able to do because of machine learning and some of the new ways that we're leveraging AI. So we describe AI as the alpha trend. It's the trend that's shaping other trends, and we think the most important trend for us as we think about businesses and organizations and the way that they leverage technology. But with all that, and the other point I'd make is, as I look at it with my Accenture hat on, having been at Accenture for 32 years through all these waves of technology that I mentioned earlier, if we chart it back and look at the growth of all those technologies in business, we haven't seen a technology grow as fast as artificial intelligence is growing in business right now. So if we measure by client projects, client adoption, the people that we have working on in these areas, no matter what measure you use, AI is growing faster in what we're seeing than any of those other technologies. So which is why it's of high interest from a business perspective. That said, AI is not really a new thing. It's been around for a very long time, 60 years, depending on how you want to measure it. But we've had some advances recently that make it more applicable for solving a lot of problems. Advances in compute power, storage, in some algorithms that we can talk about that more if you're interested, which makes it able to solve a lot of business problems and provide a better way to solve business problems than other technologies could before, which is why AI is super interesting from a business perspective. And when we look at where we really are with AI, we're still at the early stages of applying it to business. And that's why it's kind of an exciting future ahead, because we really haven't yet scratched the surface of the real business potential. And I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here, because you all, I think, probably know something about AI. But this is a slide I use just to explain AI to more audiences that aren't as familiar with AI, some of the business audiences we talk to. The AI that we're talking about today is, most of the AI that we're applying in business is based on machine learning and kind of learning, forms of learning, supervised learning, unsupervised learning, et cetera, and applying that into solving business problems in new ways. And then that leads us to the ability to do natural language understanding, speech synthesis, intelligent agents, knowledge representation, a lot of vision, a lot of things more effectively, which is creating these new sets of applications in this outer ring that are very interesting to business. Intelligent agents to serve your customers more effectively, autonomous transportation, and all sorts of other broad-based business applications. But at the heart of it, a lot of that powered by machine learning and new ways of solving problems. And one of the things that one of the ways that I try to explain this to companies is, we've had a limited tool set. For all the exciting stuff we've done with technology over the last 50 or 60 years, it's been a limited tool set that we've had to solve problems because we've had to specify exactly how to solve the problem. We've had to write programs that had to be exactly right, had to test them to be exactly right, and and figure out exactly the logic to achieve the outcome we wanted. And it was very hard to do computer vision that way. It was very hard to solve natural language understanding that way. Using machine learning and using data-based approaches, training through data, we're able to solve problems that almost seemed intractable before in new ways. And that's the way we think about this from a business perspective, is it's opening up a new tool set where you can solve business problems that seemed unapproachable before. And the competitive advantage is, can you find ways to use AI in your business to solve problems before your competitors can? And that's where a lot of the excitement comes from. Then, so that's kind of the backdrop on AI. So what I'll do is I'll give you a summary of the book. So you can all go out and buy the book if you like, or find copies of the book. But if you don't read the book, I'm going to give you the summary right now so you can say you've read the book. So here's the summary. But I hope you do. I hope at least some of you buy the book, and I'll explain why I hope you buy the book as we go through, because there's an important reason why you might want to consider buying it. But anyway, here we go. So there's 3 myths that we talk about in the book, and there's 3 myths, 3 big new ideas that we think are new things to think about, and there's 3 unsolved problems, 3 big challenges that we think are the big problems that we all are going to need to work together to solve that we don't have answers for yet. So the 3 myths that we talk about in the book are the robots are coming for us. The robots are going to take over the human race. It's going to be super intelligence, transhumanism, and we'll be kind of like in the Matrix. We'll be in human farms somewhere. And we don't believe that's the case anytime in the near future. Some people get freaked out when I say anytime in the near future, but it's a ways away before we have to worry about truly intelligent AI that's going to outwit us as humans. There was just a survey of AGI at an AGI conference among people studying this, and even there was a broad disagreement on when this might happen, but it was generally pretty far off in the future. So robots are not coming for us anytime soon, and unfortunately, that's distracting people from solving real problems that we can solve with AI. So that's why we think it's a myth that we need to get around to bust, and we need to focus on solving the problems that we can solve today with AI. The second myth is that machines will take all of our jobs, and machines will take some jobs, and I'll dive into this in more detail. But this is a more complicated question, and we actually are what I call cautiously optimistic on the jobs front and the ability to create many good jobs for people going forward. And the third myth is that businesses can keep doing things the way they were doing them than before, and everything will be okay. We believe businesses need to think dramatically differently, and those are the 3 myths. So the 3 big ideas then are these 3 things: the need to reimagine the way business works, creating new approach to jobs and the way work is structured, and then this idea of responsible AI. And we think these are 3 new things that needs to be on the CEO agenda and the leadership agenda of every company. And I'll just talk through these with one slide each real quickly. So reimagining business point is that we believe we're in a new generation of business. So, the first generation of business kind of happened near here, in Michigan. Automation, Henry Ford, Frederick Taylor, scientific management. The first generation of organizations was about automating things in a stepwise, sequential fashion, squeezing efficiency out of processes. That was the automation era. Lasted through a lot of the 1900s. Reengineering took hold in organizations at the end of the 20th century, in the late 1900s through the current time, really. Reengineering, if you're not familiar with that buzzword, is the management thinking of how you restructure your business processes and apply technology to automate the way processes work and people work. The problem with reengineering as a business mindset is it's based on sequential static processes that you can define at a point in time and then you invest large sums of money, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in information systems that automate these processes and lock you in. And that doesn't work anymore with the pace of technology advancing and with the nature of AI. And what we need is this new approach to structuring organizations and business processes, which is dynamic, adaptive, flexible, and personalized. And that's what the characteristics that we talk about in this reimagining stage of work. And just to make this real, it's different in a different way of thinking about how you structure your business. So the video just stopped there, but when the video replays on the right, we're showing an example there of, in the energy industry, of an offshore drilling platform. And how would that work differently if you think about reimagining the drilling platform? And in this sense, what's working differently is we have a digital twin, a virtual model of a drilling platform. Every component of that platform modeled digitally, modeled virtually, with real-time information coming in from sensors and equipment on the drilling platform, so that I can now use machine learning models and artificial intelligence to do predictive models of what might happen as the weather changes there. How do I adjust production? How do I dynamically change my supply chain based on the needs on the oil platform? How are the drill operators going to operate their drills differently using the real-time information they have? And it's rather than a manual and a handbook and a static process and a static way of doing things, the process is changing continuously based on all the external variables, the market price of oil affecting their drilling production volumes and everything else coming in real time. And that's what we mean by reimagining, is a very different way of thinking about a dynamic, continuously changing business, and the jobs themselves continuously changing as that business is adapting minute by minute based on the real time operating characteristics. And that's this idea of reimagining business. The second imperative we talk about is this new approach to work. And I like to use the word collaborative intelligence. The problem with the word artificial in artificial intelligence is it scares people, because you start thinking our brain is artificial, our thinking is artificial. And I think a good way of thinking about this really is collaborative intelligence, which is how do we put the best of a human's capability together with AI, algorithms, robotics, the technology we have, to create a more effective way to work. And that's what we mean by collaborative intelligence. And if you look at it that way, we believe there's 6 categories of new jobs that are created, that we're starting to see being created in organizations. And we call this the missing middle, because most organizations aren't thinking about these jobs. Most organizations are going and saying, how do we eliminate jobs? They're not thinking about the new types of jobs they need to create. And that's what we're talking about here. So it's the missing middle, because it's in the middle between technology and people, and it's missing from the current thought process. To give you a couple examples, there's a whole set of 3 jobs here, and the whole this boils down into dozens and hundreds of other jobs. Is jobs where people are needed to help AI in some way, or to help the technology operate properly. Trainers is one example. We're hiring people in Accenture to be AI trainers in a variety of dimensions. One example is when we're doing chatbots and virtual agents for companies, which is a very hot area for companies right now, developing their new chatbot virtual agent interfaces for consumers. What's the behavior that you want in that system? If I'm a bank, how's my chatbot going to operate differently than an insurance company or a retailer or a gaming company? If I can ask the virtual agent anything. So if I ask the agent a question that's not about my business, how are they going to answer? Are they going to answer in a way that reflects the brand and the values of the company? It's the same way you need to train people in a lot of respects. And it's not technologists that are doing that training. And we're not talking about like training data or tagging data or anything like that. We're talking about behavioral training of the AI. So we're hiring people to do this that are sociologists and have other types of background that understand the way that the AI needs to interoperate and interact with people. And that's, again, a scalable example of a new job type being created. And it's not just one time, because the behavior and the needs of these virtual agents, chatbots, that are becoming the brand of your company is changing constantly. And that's another phrase we talk about in the book that I think is true, and that's getting attention with the businesses we talk to, is in a lot of cases, AI becomes the brand of the company. If AI is the way you're going to interact, if AI is the way you're interacting through the dashboard with your car, if AI is the way you're interacting with your bank, the way that AI behaves is the way that the company's developing trust with you. It's the way they're developing the relationship, and it is the brand. And thinking about that in the context of these new jobs you're creating is important. Explainers is something we were debating a little bit earlier. Explainers is a new category we're seeing emerge, which is people who can explain the way that technology and AI is creating the outcomes in the business. So an extreme example of this is when the Uber car in Tempe, Arizona, about a year ago, killed a pedestrian because it misidentified an object or the nature of an object that was in its path and thought it was not a pedestrian or it was not a human. Who could explain the overall system of how that happened? What were the road conditions? What was the car doing? What was the role of AI in the vision system? What parameters were set a certain way? And how could that outcome have been avoided in the future? Yeah, there's some AI expertise that was needed in that, but there's people who have a broader context and systems understanding and knowledge of the business that are needed for these explainability roles. And if you look out on monster.com and different job posting boards now, you'll start to see these types, explainer actually appearing in job titles in a need, as businesses deploy these types of solutions. Sustainers is an interesting one, which is the people that manage AI. And we talk about a provocative idea here that just like we need HR managers and supervisors and managers to manage people, we need the same for AI. Who's going to promote or demote or coach the AI that it needs to improve or identify the performance deficiency? Who's going to add the right business context around how the algorithm's working? And I think an example of this, I think, is what Mark Zuckerberg announced with Facebook after Cambridge Analytica, after he testified to Washington and the EU on everything that happened. He publicly announced that, he said, I forget the exact quote, but it was along the lines of, we were wrong. We thought algorithms could police algorithms. Algorithms can't. Humans need to police algorithms. And he announced they're hiring 30,000 people to kind of administer the algorithms and look at the quality of the data flowing through Facebook. So 30,000 people that I would argue are in that sustain category that isn't just Facebook, is going to be needed in lots of different contexts for other organizations. And then on the right side of this is the ways that where AI helps people, robotics AI helps people and gives people superpowers, is the phrase I'd use. Lots of great examples of this. Collaborative robotics being used in factories. Examples like Mercedes for their new E-Class factory in Germany. They used to be 80% industrial robots. They actually changed it all around. It's now 80% human and 20% collaborative robots. Smaller robots reconfigured continuously by humans to do different tasks because they realized that the efficiency of the factory was better with humans reconfiguring smaller scale, more collaborative robots than with industrial robots, which required a lot of configuration and setup time. So more humans, dramatically more humans in the factory producing better factory output. And that's not just BMW. Elon Musk announced the same thing in response to the production problems he was having in the Tesla factories. BMW's done the same. So that's in this embodied category where people working with physical robots. Interaction, lots of examples of different technology being used to help people interact with technology more effectively. We've created a system at Accenture called Drishti, which is a system for our visually impaired employees and blind employees to interact with the real world. So it's an object identification system that audibly can describe a room, everything that's in it, every object that's in it, can read a menu in a restaurant and provide a lot of other capabilities for visually impaired people. It's an example of using AI for interaction. And Amplify is giving people the new tools to do their jobs more effectively. So we can talk more about this through questions if you're interested. There's a lot of kind of other rich examples underneath this, but we believe this is where a lot of the new jobs get created, is in people doing things a different way rather than machines replacing all the work that people do. And then the third area of the book is this idea of responsible AI, which we believe is something that needs to be part of the kind of policy and code of conduct and set of processes for every company that's deploying AI. And we don't think this is an optional thing. And how many of you know Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics? Yeah. So the problem is it's hard to translate those from a business perspective. So we came up with 5 things that we think broadly reflect how to apply AI safely in organizations. So there's 5 things we talk about that we think actually are very important for organizations to really implement in the way you apply AI. The first is accountability, so understanding where you have human accountability for the way AI is working. So what human in an organization is accountable for the behavior of the AI? It's something that a number of companies have skipped and have gotten themselves into trouble. Transparency is the idea that certain things you do in your company have to be explainable. One of the issues with AI is certain forms of AI are extremely hard or impossible to explain. So how do you bridge that gap? What you need to do is, it's a design level consideration. You need to think about when you apply different forms of AI and make sure if you have a process that needs to be explainable, let's say evaluating employees and determining whether to terminate or promote an employee, you probably want to understand that and explain that type of outcome to an employee. So you need to consider the type of technique you use in that case. Honesty is the simple thing which says don't break laws or rules. Sounds like an obvious one, but the CEOs of a couple companies have been indicted for criminal behavior for breaking these rules. So it's, while obvious, it's not always adhered to, and we believe it needs to be a core part of the code of conduct. Fairness is probably one of the biggest things we're focused on right now, is how do we ensure that we apply AI in companies in ways that promotes an inclusive outcome rather than promoting more discriminatory or biased behavior. An example here is a bank in the US that had a data set from a rural part of the US. The bank took that data set and used it to train an algorithm for lending approval in an urban area and instantly created racially biased lending behavior that they had to retract from the market quickly. The issue wasn't that the data was wrong or anything. It was a misapplication of the technology. It was applied in a naive fashion without understanding the consequences and created a bias issue. Microsoft's Tay chatbot that we talked about a little bit earlier learned bias from interacting with people in a certain way. Many examples of companies, another example, Amazon, if you didn't read this last week, retracted machine learning that they were using in the recruiting process because their learning algorithm had learned that Amazon hires 85% men and was excluding women in the hiring process, and had learned to discriminate against women. So many, many examples. The point is this is all avoidable if you understand the data and the processes in the right way. We've developed something we call the AI Fairness Toolkit, which is a way of thinking about your data and your algorithms and the outcomes you're trying to drive in a way where you can actually measure for fair outcomes rather than promoting bias. And that's just a standard behavior we think is necessary. And finally, human-centric is designing with humans in mind, which we've talked a lot about already. So that's, let me just wrap up on this then, the three challenges that we see out there that are unsolved. So while I'm optimistic on jobs generally, cautiously optimistic that we'll have a lot of different jobs available, I'm pessimistic that we're going to prepare people fast enough with the new skills they'll need for those jobs. So as one data point, in the US right now, there's about roughly 6 million people unemployed in the US. There's 6 million open jobs. We haven't been able to get the people skilled for the right jobs. And that issue is increasing as we automate more and apply AI. So the question is, how do we create new mechanisms to reskill people faster? Because the impact of AI is going to be more changes in jobs and create more of a need for reskilling. So there's a lot of things we're working on here, lifelong learning platforms, different ways of looking at educational grants over the course of careers. There's tax policy changes. There's a number of solutions here, but this is going to be the big issue that we'll have to face to make sure that the application of the technology of AI and other of these technologies don't increase, political issues and income and other inequality issues that we have. The reason I think you might want to buy the book, I'll just put this out there. We believe this is the biggest issue of our era, so we're donating all the proceeds of our book to nonprofits that are focused on mid-career reskilling, because we think the mid-career displaced people who are already in the workforce, they have a set of skills, and now those skills become irrelevant, are the ones that are going to suffer most. So we've donating all the proceeds from the different editions of the book that are being released around the world to apply to nonprofits who are solving that problem. So any book sales don't help me or don't help Accenture. They help nonprofits focused on that issue. The second big challenge is data. Organizations have a tremendous challenge with data. The biggest issue we have when we go into an organization isn't finding the AI use case. We can find that reasonably quickly with most organizations. We can find a good AI use case. The blocker then becomes, the issue isn't the proof of concept. We can do the proof of concept. The issue to scaling AI is the data and getting the right data of the right quality, understanding the potential bias issues, correlating data across silos of the organization, understanding external data or new sources of data that the organization might need. So data is the biggest challenge that organizations face. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of great new solutions on the data front to help companies deal with this. This is going to continue to be a big challenge. I think there's an opportunity for a lot of innovation in different ways to help companies deal with these data challenges. And then the third challenge, I think, is that we're going to continue to see innovation with AI itself, new forms of learning, new levels of compute power, enabling new types of algorithms. And the challenge for all of us, as you continue your study and go into the workforce or do what you're going to do, the challenge for business is keeping on top of what's happening continuously, because we believe that there's going to be continual learning required to stay on top and stay fresh and stay ahead in applying AI within companies. So that's it, and I'll skip past this, and that's really a summary of the book. As I said, the proceeds are all being donated, and so you've now got a summary. You don't need to read it, but you can consider buying it if you want to support a good cause. So that's a quick wrap up on the book. So thank you.